On this episode of Reestablishment, we have something special in that we're going to be talking about the future of education. What does that look like? Have you ever thought about what education is going to look like 5-10 years down the road? When you hear current news and you look at universities or you look at trade schools, you look at primary, secondary schools, what you've known and what you've thought about may not be what it looks like in the next 5 to 10 years. So in order to broach that topic today, we've got a special guest. Mr. Jon Skilton is with us. He's been an educator for 36 years, 7 different schools, 5 different states, holds a master's degree. But the reason I asked him to come in is he's forward thinking, and he really has an eye on where education is going. Listen and stay tuned, because you may learn a thing or two, and you may be surprised at what we come up with. Jon, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's
Yeah. So having been an educator all these years in traditional school settings, what is happening now, and where are we headed?
I think the biggest thing that's happening to schools is you're seeing a lot of teachers exiting the school systems and education. They do not want to do it anymore. The biggest reason for that is discipline is just out of control. You talk to more and more educators, and they say that their entire day is spent on discipline, and they're not educating. They're not teaching anymore. And so that's the primary change in schools right now, is there's not a whole lot of education going on.
Yeah, unfortunately, when I was young, they still had the paddling system in, and I saw the paddle from about 3 different principals. But that discipline is different than now. I guess what you're saying is maybe our teachers are placeholders during the day for parents so they can work, maybe?
I don't really know what's going on. I mean, I have a sister that pulled out. I have people that I know from just the community groups that I belong to, and I changed careers. I was in private education, and I got out 2 years ago, and not got out. It was just time to retire, and it was partly because it had changed so drastically. And even though it was private education, the students had changed, and teachers changed, parents changed drastically, and they just didn't support anymore. And there was such a lack of trust in the teachers, and some of it is the teachers themselves. You see what goes on in the news, and it's different types of teachers who get into trouble. So there isn't a lack of trust, and we brought some of that on ourselves, but no one trusts anyone anymore.
Yeah, it's really kind of sad. One of the things that I've noticed, especially being a business owner as well, is we're in the trades, and I've gotten back to the technical schools. Some of the traditional colleges just aren't able to capture what is needed on the ground. And we're seeing a resurgence in the technical schools, even down to the high schools are bringing back shop class or different type of trade school kind of things. Do you see that continuing?
Absolutely. There is such a need for carpenters and plumbers and electricians, and you see it everywhere. I mean, any shop that we drive by here in Florida where we live, you see hiring signs up. And I have 2 sons. I have one who's going to be getting out of the Army in May, and he is looking to do security. And he's not going to go back to college. He's looking to do security cameras, mag bolts, and things like that, and there's great money in that. Yeah. And then I have another son who has a high school degree, and he is just an extremely hard worker, worked his way up in the electrician trade, and then worked his way up digging poles and setting poles. Yeah. And now he drills core samples, and he works 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and he drills core samples in Utah and makes more money than my wife and I. And it's wild.
Yeah, that's amazing. But some of the core principles, like I remember, maybe you could tell us more about this. My youngest daughter, who's a junior in college, never learned how to write in cursive. And now they're bringing it back in the lower education. So we tried that. She could write her name, but when I would give her a birthday card, sometimes she couldn't read it. So I think we've tried different things and sampled, and I get why we do that. But what do you see moving forward? Are parents going to take a bigger role And if so, what does that look like?
I don't know about the parental role, but I will tell you what I do see moving forward is getting back to the basics. We are spread so thin with special interest groups and different kinds of groups that are coming into our schools and teaching our kids morals and social issues. And that is not what education is about. And let me go back a little bit. In the 5 schools that I was in, one of my favorite schools, it actually is my favorite school, was a classical education school. I spent 5 years as a principal of a classical education school in Kansas City, Kansas. And when I was asked to take that job, I did not want it. And I turned it down, and the hiring manager called me back, and they said, "We really want you. We think you're the right guy for the job." And finally, I took the job, and I fell in love with classical education. And here's why. Number one, classical education goes all the way back to Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato. It literally does. Those 3 Greek philosophers figured out the way the human mind learns. And it is laying a strong foundation and just immersing in knowledge and information. The second phase is applying it. The third phase is creating with it. And that was the core of our educational system up until, I would say, about the 70s, 80s. And you had what it was called in classical education, the trivium. And the trivium started with the grammar phase. In the grammar phase, it went kindergarten through about 5th grade. It was developmentally appropriate because you have kids, I have 5 kids, and kids are sponges at that point in time. They just will take in everything. Ask, "Daddy, why? Daddy, why? Why is the sky blue? Why is grass green?" And they're sponges. So you immerse them in knowledge, kindergarten through 5th grade. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, you begin applying that knowledge. That's called the logic phase. And then 9th through 12th grade, they create with that knowledge, and they put it into practice and they use it. I'll tell you an interesting side note to that. You still see that in medical school and law school. In medical school, what do you do your first year? Immersion in knowledge. You learn every single part of the human body. Second year, they say, now let's apply it. Let's learn the systems, how they work together. Third year, here's a case. What's wrong with this patient? Same thing in law school. First year, you learn all of the case law. Second year, you begin applying it. Here's the different kinds of legal practice and how we can apply it in our trade. And then the third year, here's a client. You give them a folder. They came in with these kinds of needs. What are you going to do for them? And so we still see it higher education, but we don't see it in lower education anymore. And we've gotten away from it. And I'll finish on this. In elementary school, in that grammar phase, it used to be the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I'm 61 years old, and I remember that very clearly. When I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, going to school as a little kid, you learned reading, writing, and arithmetic. And those are the basics. And reading wasn't just reading. It was looking at information, being able to process it, and then taking that information and then looking at it for biases and looking at it what's true, what isn't true, what's needed, what isn't needed. That was what reading was all about. Writing was, how do I communicate that information? It was more than just writing. It was, how do I process the information that I just read, that I just absorbed and took in, and then how do I communicate that? Last but not least, arithmetic was thinking logically. And we've gotten away from all of that. We have kids that cannot read anymore. You just said it. We have kids that can't write anymore. I remember in our classical education school in Kansas City, I had a couple of parents going up and down the hall, and they said, "What grade level is this writing right here?" And I said, "It's 4th grade, 5th grade." And they said, "I have high schoolers that can't do that." It's an amazing, amazing way to educate. And we've gotten away from that. We're an inch deep and a mile wide in education right now because we're trying to get all of these special interest groups' needs met, and we need to get back to the core basics.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a systemic issue that we have to start with the teachers being properly trained to be able to apply it forward. You know, I get, in my sphere, my world, people talk all the time about homeschooling. Where do you see that going forward?
I think it is one of the best options for training your kid. I really do, and for educating your child. I spent the 36 years of my life, with the exception of one semester, in private education. I did one semester in public school, and I wanted to stay on, but they just they weren't hiring that year, let me put it that way. And so of my 36 years in private education, when I first started and homeschool first came out, I was not a fan. I was just like, you have the audacity to think you can do it as well as we can. Homeschool education has changed drastically over the years. And there are fantastic homeschool curriculums out there now. There are homeschool groups that you can get in. And if you don't know how to teach math, you can partner in this group. And there's parents that'll teach the math. You know music, so you're going to teach the music. I think it's one of the futures of education in our country.
Do you think we've seen the apex or the zenith yet?
Not even close.
Okay.
Not even close. One of the things that happened, it was COVID. And during COVID, there were an awful lot of parents that kids were at home on a computer. They're listening to the teacher. They're watching the teacher. And they were realizing, my kid's not getting a good education. And I am not trying to put anybody down. My father was a public school principal his entire career. I have a sister who was a teacher. I've got good friends who are teachers. I am not putting them down. It is extremely difficult in America what we try to do, and that's educate everybody. Most countries don't do that.
Right.
They
That's
take the
true.
best of the best, and they move them forward. America says, nope, everybody gets an education. It's a wonderful model, but it's very difficult to do. And so that's what happened 4 years ago. And parents saw what was going on, and they said, no more. A lot of people probably don't realize this, but after COVID, when we went back into the schools, private schools just exploded in enrollment. They exploded. And I believe homeschool exploded as well, where teachers said,
Yeah,
we're
let's
done.
talk about that a little bit. Certain states have vouchers now where parents get to choose on the schools they go to. But when we talk about foundational, I've heard a couple of parents that have told me, well, my kid won't be normal because they won't be around other kids. But really, isn't normal where parents are supposed to teach their children? Isn't that really the normal education, is that we pass things along?
Well, I agree with you. That's the benefit of homeschooling. And the benefit is, as a parent, you're instilling your values in your child. Your moral base goes into your child, not somebody else's. And I don't care if it's, Christian values or if they're extremely secular values, it's your value system. And as a parent, it's your right to instill those in your child. Are they isolated? Not anymore. They're just not isolated. It used to be that way, but homeschool kids are not. And, there's always the joke, and you hear comedians all the time, and they're like, yeah, I was a homeschool kid. And it's not like that anymore because of homeschool groups. It's an incredible network. I mean, homeschool groups have dances. The other thing that's changed is sports programs. There's all kinds of sports programs. There's martial arts programs. There's music programs. And when we were in Kansas City, there was a fantastic drama program, and it was mostly homeschool kids that were in it. And it was a great business model, to be honest with you, but it was like after school sports programs or martial arts, but it wasn't that. It was drama and musicals, and that's what they did.
Awesome.
And so your child has an opportunity for social interaction, and if you make that happen for them, and it is readily available in this day.
That's good to hear. And you talked about the private education and some biblical principles there, and I think it's great if people would just take a look at those. What are the biblical principles? If you go back to the beginning, they're the ones that said in the Bible, raise up a child in the way they should go. That's your job. This is for you to raise them up, you to train those, you to bring this in the home, teach the law within the families. And I think those kind of, as we say here, reestablishment values are very, very good. And I thank you for coming today, bringing us some things to talk about, think about. If you are thinking about changing education, in your community or in your own house. These are some things that you should think about. Go to your local library, talk it over with some of your local schools, but do your research, find out what will be good for you and your house so you can train your kids properly. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next Reestablishment.
Raise your hands up. Raise it up. Reestablishment. We've got it complete. Let's talk about it.
This episode of Reestablishment is brought to you by Man360.tv, a show for men about manly things. Check it out, Man360.tv.